Hayes, we want them infected. Those are the words of a top Trump appointee directing the federal government to pursue an intentional strategy from the top down to get as many Americans as sick as possible in an attempt at so-called herd immunity. It's a strategy we have seen unfold before our eyes. We've talked about it here on the show. It's been apparent to all of us reporting on this and watching. But we now have the smoking gun evidence, emails obtained by Politico, in which the very people at the center of this say what exactly they were doing, that they wanted people to get the virus. And this is the result. That's the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. last night. Its bell tolling 300 times, one ring of the bell for every 1,000 Americans, as we pass the 300,000 death toll. According to the COVID tracking project, we lost another 3,400 Americans that have died since roughly when those bells rang just last night, and that is a new daily record. We've never seen it before. No country has. 3,400 Americans lost to the virus in just the last 24 hours. And it did not have to be this bad. We have the world's worst aggregate death toll by far, and not because of our size. There are bigger countries like China and India, of course. No, the U.S. accounts for around 4% of the world's population, but we have nearly 19% of the world's COVID deaths. But the thing to understand about that is it is not an accident, and it is not bungling. Donald Trump, as his administration, as backed by Republicans in his party, in Congress, explicitly pursued a strategy that would lead to more Americans getting sick and more Americans dying. And they did this despite the fact they kept denying they were pursuing the so-called herd immunity approach. It was always clear they were. Trump put Scott Atlas, a right-wing radiologist from a conservative think tank, in charge of the COVID response. And he did that because he saw Atlas on TV when Atlas went on Trump's favorite TV shows and said things like the following, quote, "When you isolate everyone, including all the healthy people, you're prolonging the problem because you're preventing population immunity." See that word there? Immunity. Trump would later talk about the herd. Now, it was always apparent how reckless and dangerous the herd immunity strategy was, because the one place that openly tried it, in good faith, I think they thought it was the best way to do it, was Sweden. And it became clear pretty quickly it was a catastrophe. Sweden had a far, far higher death toll than its neighbors. The elderly, folks in long-term care facilities, particularly hard hit. And the Swedish government was then forced to abandon its failing strategy quite publicly and impose new restrictions. The evidence is clear. You either suppress the virus and you get low levels of cases and low levels of deaths, or you don't, and you get high levels of cases and high levels of deaths. There is literally nowhere in the world, nowhere, that has tons of cases and lots of young people getting it who don't end up passing it to people who are immunocompromised and elderly people and people in nursing homes. That's how this virus works. It's what the public experts said from the beginning. The virus spreads. When young people started going back to colleges, we knew that it was only a matter of time until the virus got out to the rest of the community. And as the New York Times reported, though young people do have indeed less risk, deaths rose fast in college towns when they returned to campus. Again, all of this was as predictable as night following day. There has always been an ironclad correlation between cases and deaths, even as the fatality rate has indeed fallen. But here's what one Trump appointee was saying when colleges closed. Listen to this, quote, "We essentially took off the battlefield the most potent weapon we had. Younger, healthy people, children, teens, young people who we need to fastly infect themselves, spread it around." Think about that for a second. This is a Trump administration official at HHS directing COVID response, expressing that he was upset that fewer people would get the virus and get sick. Think about this. It is like a general rooting for casualties among his own troops. Now, the person who wrote those words, you should know his name. His name was Paul Alexander. He's a former part-time assistant professor at a university in Canada who was appointed to the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, Paul Alexander and this gentleman, Michael Caputo, you should also know his name and his face, both of those individuals were installed specifically to be Donald Trump's eyes and ears at HHS, the White House's eyes and ears, and to override the science when it was politically advantageous to do so. And that pair interfered with CDC reports on COVID, and they pushed back against anything they thought would undermine Trump's message that we're back, baby, get out there. And it wasn't just them. New York Times has a new report out in which Trump appointees described the crushing of the CDC by the administration, one saying, quote, damage has been done to the CDC that will take years to undo. Among those interfering in the agency were Kellyanne Conway and Ivanka Trump, just sending their ideas about once-in-a-century pandemic management. So this wasn't just a couple of political hacks mouthing off in emails. No, this was a concerted, coordinated strategy from the president, Donald Trump, down. The administration reaching into control and override the actual experts in infectious diseases at the most preeminent public health institution in the world, or at least it used to be until he broke it. The simple truth of the last 9 months sounds extreme. It sounds almost hysterical when you say it, but it is what it is. And here it is. Donald Trump and our government under his leadership explicitly pursued a strategy to spread the virus, to get more people sick. They took the side of COVID. They had the same aims as the virus. They were, as I said before, objectively pro-COVID, and they are to this day. And not because they were incompetent, even though they are, but because they actively, affirmatively chose that path. Because through a combination of idiocy and cynicism, they thought that path, aligning with the virus to infect as many people as possible, would be best for Donald Trump's reelection. And the deliberate, intentional decisions that Donald Trump and Alexander and Caputo and all of them took have gotten tens, actually probably hundreds of thousands of Americans killed unnecessarily. We are now 35 days from the end of the Trump administration. We lost 3,400 people today, and there will be more we lose tomorrow and the day after. We are at the beginning of writing the history of Donald Trump's stewardship of this pandemic. And the epitaph scrawled across this era should be those 4 words. We want them infected.